Hey there, aspiring guitarists. It's time for my favorite guitar of the day, but this time I'm going to talk about two of them because they're similar, and I'm also going to talk about guitar stereotypes and why, like many things, there's some truth to stereotypes about certain guitars, but there's also exceptions. And rather than just accept a stereotype at face value, sometimes you need to dig a little deeper and ask a few more questions. And we're going to talk about that with my Ovation guitar. This is a 1978 Ovation Celebrity CC11. It's got my family members and fellow musicians that played an important part in my guitar journey dating all the way back to 1972. So this is a beautiful guitar. I'll talk a little bit about it, and then you're going to see this blue one right here, and we're going to talk about that because it's an Ovation as well that rose above the stereotypes that are thrown out about Ovations and that I even made when I was going through coming back playing with my Dupuytren contracture. But this guitar has aged beautifully with sound. Here's an E chord. Now, here's the problem. When I first got back to playing and my Dupuytren, and my hands were so gnarled that I couldn't even it killed me to make a C chord. This was the only guitar I had when I first got back to playing over a year ago. And in fact, I didn't even have it. I had given it to my son Justin when the Dupuytren contracture over 5 years ago prevented me from playing. It broke my heart. I gave him my Ovation, my Martin, several guitars. I couldn't bear to look at them because it was so painful to play for even seconds. And then I got better. And I am not your doctor. What helped me was cutting back on gluten because, as the doctor told me, I am not your doctor. Talk with your own doctor. That too much gluten was inflammatory. So I cut back, and then I slowly got used to my hand. But when I first started getting back to playing, this neck, this nut width, this guitar that I was familiar with playing for decades, that I loved. My first good guitar was an Epiphone, but my very next one was an Ovation Balladeer. And then I got an Ovation Patriot, then a Celebrity. And Ovation was revolutionary in the 70s. They were the first to take an acoustic and to put a piezo pickup in there. And it cut through the mess. It didn't have feedback. They were revolutionary. Now, this one has no volume, nothing. All it did was plug in. You had to control volume through the amp that you were using or the PA or whatever. But there were so many singer-songwriters that used Ovations. I'm not even going to just do a Google search. You'll see, watch some videos, see America, Croce, just so many people, Glenn Campbell, that played an Ovation, and I loved my Ovation. And the thing that made it different was the back. It was made out of lyrachord. And the man who came up with this was an aircraft engineer, and people were like, he struggled trying to find out what would be a great back and a practical for a guitar and still keep the wood top. And you heard this Ovation is beautiful. But when I got back to playing, the problem, and you'll hear this all over the internet, people griping about Ovations. But maybe they shouldn't be. Certainly they can gripe about how deep this bowl is. As my belly got bigger, and that's a whole nother story, but as my belly got bigger, now not so much when you have a strap on, because the strap's holding the weight. But sitting on a couch, man, this sucker would come flying out because my belly was pushing it. And that broke my heart. And I wasn't going to get rid of this guitar. It had too much meaning. It was still too beautiful. Well, now I play it pretty well. I had shoulder issues as well. So getting over this deep bowl back here, it was a challenge. And I already had a challenge with my hand. So I put this one to the side. The first guitar I got, when I went to a guitar shop, and a lot of people laugh at this guitar, but I loved it, was a Fender Mustang. And I bought a American Player Series, I think. And, it had a narrow neck, a 7.5-inch radius. The scale was shorter than most guitars, but I was able to play it. That made a big difference to me. And then I got to where later, as my hand got better and I could stretch it and get it out further and further, back to stretching the pinky to make chords, I didn't like it so much. But I still love this Ovation. But I still had this bowl problem, this giant. Well, you'll hear people laughing about our big guts and Ovations, but let me show you the solution to that. And this is a new Ovation Celebrity, and I just bought it, and I want you to look at the difference. This is a shallow bowl. Now, they also make a mid-depth bowl. And why is the sound hole funny? Well, we're going to talk about that. Because to keep the beautiful sound of an Ovation, this sound hole configuration allowed them to use the bracing that they use to keep this beautiful sound. Here comes an E chord. And as you can hear, there's still plenty of projection. But look how shallow. Oh, and while we're looking, look at that preamp and EQ, built-in tuner. I mean, Ovation, it wasn't too long after I got my old one that Ovation started adding a volume control and a little of this. They put so much into acoustic guitar pickups and getting the sound. It was amazing. But I got to tell you something. I have fallen in love with Ovation all over again. Just because they've done something to deal with my spare tire in my gut. And God bless them for that. Because this sits so well. I can get around it. I can hug this guitar. I can noodle. I can play. I love the Gibson scale length. The 24 3/4, and yet I still like a Fender. That's my humidifier coming on. I don't redo videos because that's part of life. Keeps my guitars, in correct humidity and moisture in the wood. But anyway, this is kind of in the middle. It's a 25.3 scale. And it has a very unusual radius, being a 10-inch radius. Now the nut width up here is 1.68. To me, this plays like butter. But that's me. That's subjective. So why did I throw in Stereotypes? Well, you're going to hear all kind of things about guitars. Well, a Fender's for this. A Telly's for if you want to play country. A Strat's for this. You can mod a Strat. You can do this. Why, no player would do this. Why, no one would do that. Why, everybody knows that if you buy a Gibson, the headstock's going to break. Everybody knows that. Blah, 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 blah. There's usually a little bit of truth to a stereotype. And then there's a lot of bias to Stereotypes as well. So what do I do with Stereotypes? I'm guilty of them. I didn't realize Ovation had made a super shallow bowl or a mid-depth bowl instead of what my old one is, a deep bowl. D-E-E-P, deep. It's the width of the bout, the lower bout and the upper bout. So you have to research. It's another reason that I encourage you to go visit a real guitar shop, be it a mom and pop, a guitar center, arts and music, whatever you got. So there's nothing like playing a guitar. So Ovation to me is still a wonderful guitar. I've got memories just like I have with the Epiphone being my first good guitar that I saved up for 3 summers cutting grass to get. But this one, or I should say the first Epiphone I got, it came, oh God, you couldn't do this now. I actually did roofing during the summer as a teenager up on a 3 and 4 story roof. Well, there was probably labor laws in the 70s, but whoever I was working for, it didn't get enforced with, and I'm glad there's labor laws. A teenager doesn't need to be on top of a 4-story roof without practice, but that's how I bought my Ovation Patriot, the Balladeer, and what came after. I worked. And then I worked at a department store with another guitarist friend of mine, Ronnie Vines, that went on to write a country music song of the year for Jason Aldean. So, you know, we worked for our guitars, and there are guitar stereotypes. And when you hear them, don't just not ever look at the guitar. I would suggest to you is, okay, file that in your brain. Okay, an Ovation has a deep bow. Well, see if you can try out the different bowl depths. A Fender is best for country. Well, if you're not a country player, pick the telly up, see how it does with your style of playing. Stereotypes help us. They do. They a lot of times bring out major issues, and sometimes they're a bold-faced lie of somebody trying to promote their own agenda. But remember, the guitar journey is a personal journey. Now, I'm going to put a link in the description of this Ovation. Once you're there, you can look at other depth bowls and things like that. But and not to mention, I love this color. I mean, look at this. This to me is just beautiful. So that's my favorite guitar of the day, and I hope it's a little guitar talk about why we need to look a little deeper when we hear a stereotype. We don't need to automatically dismiss the stereotype, but maybe we need to examine, ask questions, and do a little due diligence with the guitar so you have a blessed guitar journey. And like I always say, hey, happy picking.